Hi folks, in this video we are returning back to one of my favourite lines, which is Masters of the Universe. Now, as you can see, I have printed out Orko. Now, he is in 1/8 scale. He has been sculpted by the guys from LA Figures, and he's all been cleaned up and primered. So you can see the figure is primered in a nice grey, and I've done the base completely in black. He's got a couple of these sort of magical beams emanating away from the base, and I have sprayed those black, and I've also put a gloss, satin gloss of varnish over those, and the reason for that will become apparent later on in the video. So I will just give you a very quick turnaround. Now, there's not an awful lot to this model. It's just a simple rock base, as I say, a couple of magical sort of tendrils, and then the figure itself. So he is just kind of attached here. There's a peg at the base on his back there, as you can see. So the model, I haven't glued any of the parts together, so it can all be nice and broken down. So the hat is separate, the hands are separate, the head. The only thing I've glued together is the arms. Okay, so this is going to be a nice, simple, straightforward one. I'm going to try out something new for the magical parts. Got some new paints ready to go for that. So this should be nice and fun, simple, quick one to do. So let's get cracking. Now, with the model all broken down into its pieces, I'm going to start with painting the body. And for the first colour, I'm going to use some Screamer Pink, which is a nice dark pink. So as ever, I've got some using my wet palette, and I've also just thinned the paint down with a little bit of water. So I'm going to do this all across the body. Now, you might think, isn't Orko red, not pink? But he is actually a very deep pink. It's just often, I think sometimes in the cartoon, depending on the lighting and whatnot, he did look like he was red. But no, trust me, this is the closer colour. So after a couple of coats of that Screamer Pink, this is what I'm left with. And what I'm going to do now is do an all-over wash using this Carabao Crimson. So this is a very sort of dark red wash. And what this will do is just run into all the recesses, because there's lots of nice textures on this model. And yeah, it'll just basically darken down all the recesses and give it a much more realistic look. So it's just a case of slapping this all over and just keeping an eye on it so it doesn't pool too much in certain areas. And after that wash has been given plenty of time to dry, you can see how it's darkened down all the areas, everything with a little bit of sort of texture, all the recesses, it's gone inside, and it's done its job. So it looks a little bit messy now, but don't worry, we're going to clean this back up. First thing we're going to do is take some of that Screamer Pink again, and we're going to do a dry brush over the entire thing. So all you need to do is take a dry brush, preferably, or if just one, an old brush with some nice stiff bristles. Take a bit of the paint, then grab yourself some kitchen towel and take most of it off. Once you've got most of it off, just test it, get your thumb, see how much you're leaving behind. Once you're sort of leaving that kind of amount, then it's just a case of going over the entire thing just to bring back some of that original colour again. So after that dry brush, you can see that the recesses have been kept nice and dark, and everything else is the original base colour. So what I'm going to do now is a second dry brush, and that will be using some Pink Horror, so exactly like we just done before, and this will just go all over the model. Finally, I've just mixed some Pink Horror with 1 or 2 drops of Squid Pink, just to give it a little bit of a brighter colour. It looks quite bright, but don't worry, it's fairly translucent. And I'm just going to concentrate this on the very extreme sort of creases, so things like the sleeves and the hem of, well, I guess it's a dress really that he's wearing. And after all that dry brushing, you can really see the difference that it makes. And then just to finish off the clothing, it's just some black of your choice across the O. It is on to Orko's hat next, and first colour I'm going to use is some of this Mephiston red from Citadel. I'm going to follow that red with an all over wash using this Carenberg Crimson. Okay, so as you can see, that wash has really darkened down the overall tone and also gone into all the recesses, which is what we wanted it to do. So we're going to brighten it back up just like we did with the clothing before. So I'm going to take that Mephiston red, original red that I used, and I'm going to do an all over dry brush, trying to keep the recesses nice and dark whilst bringing out the colour of everything else. Next up is a dry brush using an orange. I'm going to go with this Riser Rust. And this is just going to be across the entire hat. Okay, next up I'm going to work on the hands and the face. And to start with, I'm going to use some Thousand Suns blue, which is quite a dark turquoise blue. But obviously we're going to come back in and we're going to highlight up from here. Next up is some Zimmer blue, and I'm going to take my small dry brush and just very slowly build this up across the hands. I've now made up a 50-50 mix of that Zimmer blue and some pure bold titanium white, and I'm going to do one further dry brush, so this is the colour that it makes, across all the skin parts again. Finally, using that same brightened mix, I'm just going in and doing a little bit of edge highlighting around some of the areas I just want to really bring out the contrast in. Turning to the head, the first colour I'm going to use is some of this blue violet, and that's going to be for his scarf. I'm going to follow that up with an all-over wash of Druky Violet. So this is a nice dark purple wash. Now that wash is going to be followed by a dry brush using the original blue violet that we painted the scarf with to begin with. And again, just like we did with the clothes, this is going to tidy the purple up. Now mixing a 50-50 of that blue violet we used before with a little bit of squid pink, I have made a slightly brighter purple, and I'm going to use this and do a final dry brush across the scarf. Just really looking to catch the edges on this one. Okay, next up is painting in the face. Now, as you can see, I made a bit of an error here. I painted the skin blue when I did the hands and the ears, and then realised, hang on a minute, his face is supposed to be black. So I'm going to correct that mistake now. So basically black all across the face. With the face now the correct colour, I'm going to use a little bit of dark tan. I'm going to paint in the eyes. I'm then going to cover the entire eye using this contrast paint Imperial Fist Yellow. Then I'm going to take some black and attempt to paint in 2 eyeballs on each side. That is then followed up with a little dot of white into each eye, just to give that little bit of reflection, a bit more realism. So turning to the rocky part of the base, this is going to be really straightforward and easy. It's going to be dry brushing the whole way. So if you've seen any of my Motu videos before, you're going to get a sense of what I'm about to do. So I'm going to speed run through this. I'm going to basically dry brush the entire thing, working up from a dark green all the way up to a yellow. So I'm going to start with Caliban green, wire flesh, then medium olive, goblin green, moot green, and then finally a touch of yellow ochre. So starting with Caliban green, what I generally do is go a bit harder on the initial few base coats and then lighter as I work up the lighter colours. Okay, so I'm now going to deal with the sort of magical kind of tendrils, whatever you want to call them, that come off the model. Now, there's a couple of different ways you could go about this. Obviously, you could print the whole thing in some sort of clear resin and then colour it that kind of way. I'm personally not a fan of that. I always think that to have a fully painted model and then kind of a big piece of sort of clear plastic just looks like clear plastic. So there's probably other ways you can do it, but I'm not personally a fan of that. So what I'm going to do instead, this is the idea. I've got myself a fancy new paint. I've got some of this Colour Shift Metal Cobalt Blue from Green Stuff World. Now what this does is it transforms from one colour to another depending on how you're viewing it. So it's a metallic sort of paint. It works best over black that has been glossed. So that's exactly what I've done. So I've sprayed these parts black, and I have actually used a satin. Right, I didn't have a gloss varnish, but I've sprayed it with a satin varnish. So hopefully, so you can see it is sort of reflective. So hopefully that will be enough, and we'll get a good result. I think ideally you'd use this stuff through an airbrush. My airbrush is out of commission at the moment, so I'm actually going to do this by hand. It says you can do it by hand, so let's have a go and we'll find out together. Okay, so this colour is supposed to go sort of metallic blue into purple. Looking at the paint on the palette there, it just kind of looks white with sparkles in it, so it's not quite what I was expecting it to look like, but nevertheless, let's get ourselves a brush, damp it down ever so slightly, and let's go for this. Oh wow, actually you can see that makes quite a big impact almost immediately. It's going to take a couple of coats, I think. This is pretty thin stuff, but yeah, let's carry on with this and I'll come back once it's had a couple of coats and fully dried. So after a couple of coats of that paint, this is the effect it's coming out with. I don't know how well this has been picked up on camera, but it definitely does change colour. Goes from a sort of deep blue into a purple, so I'm quite pleased with that. The only thing I would say is it isn't really a great idea to use a brush as I have. It's gone a little bit streaky in areas. It's kind of like painting with varnish. If you've ever sort of used like one of the Citadel Technical Storm Shields type varnishes, it's kind of like it's very milky consistency, so as a consequence it's not easy to get an even coat. You sort of see there, hasn't quite come out that evenly. So I think what I'm probably going to do, I'm going to keep it as is, and then I'm probably at some point I'm probably going to respray it once I get my airbrush fixed, and probably put it through an airbrush and do it a little bit better than it is. But it is doable through a brush, as long as you're probably a bit more careful than I was. And in fact what I didn't just stop there, because there was two pieces. I had another colour that I wanted to try, which was this Nebula Copper, and this is supposed to be sort of a red into orange, and so this is what we're left with. And again, the colour shift definitely does work. What is, I have to say, when you look at it up close, it's not that impressive, but when you sort of walk away from it and come back in, when you have sort of light bouncing around, I guess, from all different areas, it really is a lot more effective in that colour shift. So you can sort of see it go slightly sort of orange into red. But as I say, yeah, from distance it definitely looks better. But yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. I think that's quite a nice little effect. So I'm going to go with that. So that's it then. The base is finished. So let me put this model together and I'll come back and show you the final result. Okay then folks, I think that'll just about do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something out of that, and I will see you very soon in the next one.